joining us today. Welcome to Engaging Educators in School Justice Partnership webinar. I am Teresa Bohannon. I'm the Senior Policy Analyst at the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges. We have a partnership with 4 organizations, and today joining us is the National Association of State Boards of Education. NASB is an education partner with NCJFCJ on the School Justice Partnership Project, which is ultimately designed to reduce the pathways from schools to juvenile justice system. In October, just to give everybody a bit of context, in October of 2014, the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention awarded NCJFCJ funding to support the School Justice Partnership Project work, which works to enhance collaboration and coordination among schools, mental and behavioral health specialists, law enforcement, and juvenile justice officials to help students succeed in school and reduce exclusionary discipline incidents that can ultimately lead to court and juvenile justice involvement. NCJFCJ and its partners develop tools, training materials, and other resources on the collateral consequences of juvenile justice involvement and provide technical assistance to a number of sites around the country. On today's webinar, we'll be discussing the important role that educators and school administrators have in eliminating pathways from school to juvenile justice system and the need to engage schools early in school justice partnership initiatives. Our expert panelists will share their knowledge and insight on how to build and sustain effective school justice partnerships and help us identify strategies for engaging school communities. First, we're going to hear from Dina Holliday Ingram, Director of Student Discipline for Fulton County Schools. She also leads the School Discipline Prevention and Intervention Department. Today, Dina will give us an overview of the school pathways journey in Fulton County, Georgia. In her presentation, she will provide the methodological steps to reducing instances of over-reliance on delinquent court referral filings for misdemeanor school-related offenses while strategically highlighting the resource benefits for school administrators. At this point, I'm going to hand it over to Dina. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, I'm Dina Holliday Ingram, Director of Student Discipline with Fulton County Schools. And I'm going to just take a moment, take my time to share with you kind of what my role is in the district and how that translates into student support, and then how that has evolved into a collaboration with the Fulton County Juvenile Court with the School Pathways Project. So in my current role, I am responsible for policies, practices, and of course the discipline. And so undergirded by the belief that the ultimate goal of discipline is self-discipline, I strive each day to figure out how can we implement policies and practices and then ultimately discipline in a way that helps all children reach their full potential and also become responsible and productive citizens. So to that end, you'll notice under the policy section, I have no disrespect. In January of 2014, the U.S. Department of Justice as well as U.S. Department of Education issued a Dear Colleague letter, which many of you may be familiar with, but it really talked about the disproportionate suspensions of students of color for minor infractions, and disrespect was mentioned quite a bit through that. So I joined Fulton County Schools in the 2010-2011 school year, and we began to look at this rule that we had called disrespect. And as many of you know, disrespect is a very loaded, subjective term, and so we began trying to unpack that by including examples in the Code of Conduct of what disrespectful behavior looked like. But still, and then we kind of evolved that into other rules, and eventually it was, do we even need this conclusion in the Code of Conduct, or can we just focus more on the behavior? So we have behavior in the Code of Conduct that describes what quote-unquote disrespect or inappropriate behavior looks like, but we removed that word beginning in our 2014-2015 Code of Conduct, so that would be August of 2014. You'll also see under policies, one of the major, most recent policies is eliminating zero tolerance for minor infractions. And so basically zero tolerance is requiring suspension, and if there's nothing going on in ISS, including ISS, removing a student from instruction without looking at any other factors. And so this idea of mandatory suspensions. And so we only have that beginning the 2016-17 school year, so we're like 2 months into that Code of Conduct. But it's only required, suspension is only required for 9 offenses, and those are the very serious offenses, like having a handgun on campus, which by law you're required to suspend a student or expel a student for at least a calendar year, drug distribution, some injuries to employees. So those very serious infractions are the only infractions in our code of conduct that require a suspension. All other offenses can start with supportive discipline management techniques up to different levels of either timeout, ISS, OSS, and possibly a hearing, but that's not where we start for the other infractions. Supportive discipline management techniques are those types of strategies and things that, why did the kid, what was the root cause, what was the function of behavior, and how you get some supports for that. So if it was, an anger-related situation, did the kid talk with the counselor about, building better skills? So really focusing on helping students make those better decisions. When we have to impose discipline, we provide advice to schools when students misbehave as to what type of discipline or what response is how we refer to it this year, is what response is appropriate, which might not be suspension, but some supportive discipline management techniques. If a kid is referred to a hearing, we have what's called a discipline team meeting. So it's kind of like a mediation before the hearing, to have a meeting with the parent and the student and administrator, kind of in a restorative manner, to talk about what happened, what's the school's recommendation, and to see if it can be resolved. If it cannot be resolved, then of course by law we're required to have disciplinary hearings within 10 days, 10 school days. We know that we cannot get in front of discipline or actually help students be successful by just responding and imposing discipline and having hearings. So we also focus on building capacity within the district around best practices. You'll notice ISS. We offer 3 workshops per year for our ISS instructors to help build their capacity and coach them to implementing best practices within ISS. Kids go to ISS for behavior, and so what practices, what reflection activities, what types of behavioral support can be provided. But also, we also know that a lot of kids who have behavior challenges may also have academic deficits. So how do we incorporate some academic support in a meaningful way to actually help bridge those gaps and build those skill deficits so that students start experiencing some level of success to help them go back into the classroom and also be successful. We also have implemented positive behavior interventions and supports, PBIS, in 60 out of our 95 schools. So that's 63% of our schools are now currently implementing that framework. And many of you have heard of that, but that's basically a nationally recognized evidence-based framework of how do you actually impose evidence-based practices to systemically improve the outcomes by looking at your data to ensure that you're implementing those practices that your data suggests that you need, so making those database-driven decisions. I mentioned restorative practices. We also have a number of our schools that are implementing restorative practices, this whole idea of how can we improve our culture and climate by doing things with students and with people in the environment and not to them. So how do we build a strong sense of community and connecting with each other through circles, through effective questions, effective statements when we're interacting, so that when something does happen, we're more apt to be able to actually repair the harm and engage in a restorative manner to help the student and also the victims of those offenses feel the sense of wholeness and repair the harm that was done. Then lastly, we have offered professional development to our administrators. And when we talk about discipline and behavior, oftentimes it's not a student issue. It could be an adult issue. So how do we help build capacity of teachers around classroom management? So we offer workshops for classroom management, having a culturally responsive classroom, and also positive crisis intervention, through which we teach de-escalation, communication, and then at the far end of the continuum, restraint. When there is a need to restrain students because there are threats of safety to themselves or others, how do you do that in a way that is as safe as possible? We also have offered out-of-school alternative suspension programs for students who have been suspended to give them an opportunity to actually receive up to a 50% reduction in their suspensions by participating in an out-of-school alternative suspension program where we provide team building support, group counseling, individual counseling, academic support, as well as other collaborative interventions. We initially were offering that off-site, and we were able to reduce suspensions up over 40% for those students who participated. We've now started providing opportunities to schools to offer on-site, some funding support to offer on-site programs to be able to keep students in the building, but yet and still try to really provide some support to those very specific and root cause of those behaviors and provide strategies on-site, keeping the students in the building, not having to deal with the transportation issue, but making sure that they're there and still getting the supports that they need. So based on those policies, practices, and discipline, this slide shows the decreases that we've seen over the last 3 years. That first, I guess, bluish-purple bar was a 19% decrease in ISS, then 20 and 17, and then for OSS, the first red bar would be an 11% decrease, followed by a 15% decrease in 14-15. And last year, we had a 1% decrease, but that was our lowest number of days in 15 years in the district for out-of-school suspension. And what that plateau suggests is that it's very important and one that supports our decision this year to roll out or update our code of conduct to eliminate the zero tolerance for minor infractions, to really try to get to, the root cause of those behaviors and help students actually build the capacity so we get beyond the numbers and make sure that the supports we're providing are actually helping students make better decisions and actually helping them be successful. We don't do this work in isolation. I'm a big believer in collaboration. And so the main, I guess, stakeholder that we collaborate with in this district is our administrators, our assistant principals, helping to build their capacity, as I said, through, the professional developments that we offer, workshops that we offer, as well as how do we help coach. We coach them and provide them support and advice around how to actually provide the appropriate response to behavior, and how making sure that it's proportionate to what has occurred, and also looking at how do we help build the student skills and help them learn from this behavior. When we rolled out the code of conduct, we asked administrators, well, why do you impose discipline? And a lot of the responses were to help them learn from their mistakes, to help them learn better behavior so that they won't repeat these same acts again. And we know in order to do that, the response that we provide has to give them some skills to do that. And so are we looking at providing an opportunity to actually do some role modeling of the appropriate behavior we like to see, or conferencing with a counselor, or those other strategies that will help get to the root cause. Also, we collaborate quite a lot with our student support services. I am in the student support services department for our district. So that's a collaboration with our athletics department, ESOL department, Title I, counselors, social workers, and students with disabilities, our services for exceptional children department. We also have implemented PBIS in our transportation department. So district-wide, our transportation department has a PBIS team, and we actually kind of focus on this door-to-door PBIS. We know that students are ours from the time that they leave their home to the time that they return, and how do we start, even at the bus stop and when they get on the bus, start infusing this positive behaviors, interventions, and supports for our students so that they're connected and will more likely to be successful. How do we set them up for success? So this is our second year of implementing PBIS through our entire transportation department. We have over 600 drivers. We also collaborate with community-based organizations. We have a number of organizations that come on site to some of our schools to actually provide mental health support on site, as well as other supports that our students and families need. And then last but not least, and this will transition into our school pathways conversation, is juvenile court. We have had a very productive and great collaboration with Fulton County Juvenile Court. Our social workers, who's led by Jackie Cathy in our district, they have real strong support and working relationship with the juvenile court, and we offer attendance intervention module for parents that the court was very supportive of to try to help with reducing the absences that our students have. We've applied for a number of grants with juvenile court, which kind of led into the school pathways partnership that we currently have with our juvenile court. So how did the school pathways partnership come about? Fulton County Juvenile Court was selected as one of 16 counties across the country to participate in the School Pathways Project, which was led by NCJ FCJ. And so that began in December 2014 when Chief Judge Bradley Boyd coordinated our initial meeting with NCJ, FCJ, and other key stakeholders. There were probably about 20 people in the room to develop a specific strategy of how we would dismantle the school-to-prison pipeline in Fulton County. After that meeting, Judge Renata Turner came in, and who's also one of the judges of Fulton County Juvenile Court. And for 2015 to 16, she kind of facilitated and coordinated our technical assistance sessions and also helping us actually move through that process of identifying and developing the key stakeholders, graduated responses, resources, collaborative partners, and our interagency agreement and memorandum of understanding. I noticed in the poll there was a question, or there was a need to clarify what focus acts are. So focus acts are those school-related offenses that a decision is made that will not be referred to court. So Judge Turner coordinated a technical assistance session with Judge Stephen Teskey, who I'm sure you guys have heard a lot about around the school pathways work. And during that session, it was a lot of our collaborative partners in the room, and we walked through a number of steps to kind of identify what offenses would we not refer to court. And I'm going to show you a list of those in just a moment. But that conversation was very rich. And so in August of 2016, just last month, we officially began implementing our school pathways project here in Fulton County Schools. And I've spoken with our Executive Director of Safety and Security, and he's informed me that our referrals to juvenile court, when compared to referrals this time last year, are actually down. So what focus acts did we agree upon? You'll see on the left side of the slide, those are the 11 focus acts. It took a lot of time to get there. There are some that we talked about that didn't make it. When you're thinking about focus acts, you want to make sure that you are not selecting offenses that might become politically charged. You don't want to shoot yourself in the foot before you start. So what do I mean by that? One of the conversations we had was around threats, whether or not we should include threats. So we know in the legal side that, that could be something very something very simple, but also it could potentially be something big. And so we decided that threats was something that we didn't want to include as a focus act, but these others, we decided that probably we could. And even with the possession of drugs, that's simple possession, not having a lot of drugs, but something where it might indicate that the student might actually need an intervention to help deal with the drug use. And so you'll see on the right-hand side of the screen a list of response options. And so the way we compiled this list is there are a number of partners at the table, and we said, well, what programs do you already offer? So in our district, we also offer an Insight Drug Intervention Program for students who have first-time possession of a small amount of drugs. And so, again, that's to kind of get to that education piece. So it's a four-day course for 2 hours a night for 4 days. The parent and the student has to attend, and we give them education around drug use as well as the legal consequences. We also offer in our district the Stopping Acts of Violence Through Education program, and that's for anger management, conflict resolution type situations. And if students participate in those programs, they can receive a reduction in their suspension as well. And then we came up with the others again by what do we already have in place that we could actually make a part of this partnership. Who were the collaborative partners? And there are some very key collaborative partners in the process. Of course, that being Fulton County Juvenile Court, and I mentioned Chief Judge Bradley Boyd and Judge Renata Turner. Also, the Chief Probation Officer, Mr. Adolphus Graves, was very instrumental. In Fulton County Schools, the connection between the court is really with our Fulton County School Police, our law enforcement agency. And so Dr. Shannon Flannery is over that department, and that the actual police department is led by Chief Melvin Dean. And so when we were trying to figure out what would be a part of the memorandum of understanding or the interagency agreement and what those acts would be, those were the key persons who were very instrumental in that. Because Fulton County has two school systems within it, you have Fulton County Schools as well as Atlanta Public Schools. Atlanta Public Schools is a part of this. There's a collaboration with both districts. Fulton County Department of Children and Family Services, Department of Juvenile Justice, the Office of the Child Attorney, Office of Public Defender. We also have the Truancy Intervention Project, which is a project that does a lot of great work with helping our students who have attendance issues to try to help provide some early intervention services to those parents and students to help improve school attendance, because we know if students aren't in school, they cannot learn, so that's a very critical partner. And then other community-based service organizations as well. How did we strategically engage school district staff and administrators? I think this is, there are a couple things that could be very helpful, and then there's some things to be mindful of. When deciding that you want to have a school pathways project in your jurisdiction, it's critical to reach out to school district student support services department or school police. Those will be the departments that will actually be responsible for the work within the district to implement it. Also, assuming goodwill. There's a lot of talk around the school to prison pipeline, but when working with the district, I think it's important to assume that anyone who's at the table is actually there because they too, like you, want to help our students be successful and provide and connect the dots to the supports that are necessary to make that a reality. Acknowledge joint responsibility. While there's the school to prison pipeline, we all know that there are other factors that actually also help or provide support to our students to help them be successful. So, it's very important that all partners assume responsibility for the supports and the strategies that they have available to provide to help students and families be successful. Explain the purpose and provide the overview of the MOU to school administrators. It's important that the administrators know what is contained within the MOU and what that process and strategy will look like. It's important to maintain those open lines of communication. Engage district staff and administrators in resource mapping. The great benefit for administrators at being at the table for this project is all the resources that are brought to bear by being a part of the partnership, the additional wraparound supports, the additional professional development that can be provided by the collaborative partners through what they do. Also be willing to learn more about and maximize the roles and functions of each partner. Come into it with an open mind and be willing to learn more about the collaborative partners at the table, what they do, and how you can maximize their resources. It's very, very important to make that database decisions, not what we think we have a lot of cases that are referred to court for fighting, or we think that we have a lot of cases referred to court from a particular school or district. Knowing what's being referred and being able to look at the data to see exactly what types of behavior is going to help drive the types of resources that are needed to provide the supports to the students and families that are involved. And also infuse national and state resources and literature. There's a lot of valuable information from NCJ, FCJ around this whole project. They have a lot of material. Use them, share them to help share the word. Things to be mindful of, that administrators are responsible for school discipline, and school police officers and resource officers are responsible for law enforcement. And so those two things are connected at times, or they have a lot of interaction, but they're actually separate. And making sure that we're maximizing the expertise of the persons in the area that are responsible for discipline or law enforcement, and not merging outside of our lane. When you start merging into areas where the responsibility or the resources are not, we start diluting the effect of the experts that we have on the panel or have within the collaborative partnership, allowing each partner to stay in their lane and stick with, the expertise that they have in the areas that they work in, as well as the resources, actually helps us maximize our partnership. And, of course, not over-sensationalizing perceptions about, all schools want to do is kick kids out of school and they don't really want anything. Of course, nobody on this phone says that, but there's a lot of that happens. And so being the person in the room that speaks up and says, well, we're going to assume that everyone is trying to do the best that they can, with the resources that they have to actually help kids be successful, and how can we all come together to maximize that? There are some realities in the limitations of data sharing. FERPA, HIPAA, there's a lot of, acronyms that prevent how we share information, but there's also opportunities, like within the state of Georgia, there is actually a code section that says when you're within a school pathway partnership like we are, there is an opportunity for those confidentiality and privacy protections to be kind of loosened a bit so that the collaborative partners can share information. And then, again, using data to bridge the gaps in services and resources. What's already being provided and doing a resource inventory list to determine that, and then trying to figure out where the gaps are so you'll know exactly where to be able to provide some support.
Thank you, Dina. Now we will hear from how a diversion program developed by the Philadelphia Police Department has led to an immediate and significant impact on school-based arrest. We'll hear from William Hite, Jr., Superintendent of School District of Philadelphia, and Kevin Bethel, the retired Deputy Police Commissioner and current Stoneleigh Foundation Fellow, Senior Policy Advisor to the Juvenile Justice Research Reform Lab at Drexel. Since 2012, Dr. Hite has worked to improve students' academic performance in the School District of Philadelphia. The district strives to create a system of great schools in every neighborhood. Under his leadership, the district has opened new innovative high schools, expanded successful school models, and redesigned schools in partnership with communities. Kevin is a retired Deputy Police Commissioner in the Philadelphia Police Department. I'm going to turn it over to you, Dr. Hite. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm going to punch through a couple of slides so that we can get to some important information, and I want to make sure that Kevin has enough time to go through his information as well. And so on slide 1, and this to me is a picture of what happens in situations or in many school districts with a zero tolerance approach. It is an approach that creates a scenario where we're actually disconnecting youth from resources and support services. And when those young people are no longer in schools where many of those support systems exist, then there are several entities that are waiting as the stopgap measure for them. And those things include governmental entities like the welfare system, the judicial system, courts, jails, gangs, streets, and many of you know what else many of our young people are exposed to. And then when you consider that those are the results of zero tolerance, it's one picture to look at in Philadelphia where in 2011 to 2012, when we were deep into a zero tolerance policy here in Philadelphia, there were almost 1,630 student arrests. There were, and in 2012, 2013, 1,400 student arrests. And many of those children were also being exposed to DHS services, and children were just being written off. And so one of the things that we set out to do first was to understand the problem. And what was the problem that we were seeing? And many of these things were symptoms of larger issues in schools. The other thing that we acknowledge is that we needed to keep children in schools. That's where the supports were. That's where children learn to read and write and do math and communicate and problem solve. So we needed, first and foremost, to keep children in school. And so just like our colleagues in Fulton, we worked on a broad approach to put dignity and understanding first. And so first we wanted people to seek to understand what was going on in the lives of children, and we actually began training individuals to recognize trauma. And once we trained individuals to recognize trauma, then we had to begin developing structures in order to provide those strategies for children who were exposed to traumatic environments in and around their communities. The next thing we did was we sought out partners who were committed to making a difference, and those partners were varied. They were in the philanthropic space, they were with governmental agencies, they were with city agencies, and those individuals helped us to begin transforming our district, particularly around climate. And so just like our colleagues in Fulton, we also thought it was really important to begin focusing on environments and cultures and relationships with young people. And so we had to do a couple of things. First and foremost, we eliminated the approach to zero tolerance. We began this work after we hired a deputy for school climate and safety. I believe Rachel is on this call as a participant. We also worked with state and local judicial and law enforcement agencies to develop what we call a diversion program, and you're going to hear more from the former Deputy Commissioner Bethel in a minute about that. And we emphasized de-escalation and conflict resolution. And one of the things that was really important is those programs like restorative practices, conflict resolution, youth court, and we began training individuals both on mental health first aid and de-escalation tactics. And not only were our counselors and teachers trained on this, but also our school resource officers. And then we stopped arrests for low-level offenses that led to school dropouts. And we also stopped suspending students for things where there could be a lot of subjectivity in terms of the decisions that were made about student discipline. And one of the reasons for that was that wherever there's gray area, there's the opportunity for individuals to misuse a code of student conduct and lump all children into one category in order to remove them from school. A couple of key things happened that allowed us to focus on school climate. One was a significant grant. It was a school climate transformation grant from the federal government, and it provides us with a 5-year funding opportunity to really improve behavioral outcomes and learning conditions for all students. And we were very pleased to be a recipient of that. And our goals and objectives here were, number one, to look at the vast resources that existed across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and the city of Philadelphia, and really gain an understanding of those efforts to improve school climate. And it wasn't just understanding, but it was also coordinating all of those efforts, particularly at the school level. And then we wanted to stem the school pathways to juvenile justice. And that's where we had the assistance of the grants, both federal grants and local philanthropic grants, that helped us to begin focusing on climate and the number of young people who were either suspended or arrested. But the whole notion of all of this work was to change an approach, and to change an approach where we were either suspending, arresting, expelling children as the first line of defense for misbehavior. And one of the things we wanted to do was really create different types of environments and atmospheres in schools. And so the results, during the first year of the diversion program, and this is a program that we began working, when we began working with Philadelphia Police, we saw the large number of students who were associated with law enforcement as a result of behaviors that started as non-criminal offenses. And the first year of our diversion program, working with the Philadelphia School Police and Department of Health Services, Human Services in Philadelphia, we saw a 90% reduction in the number of students diverted voluntarily, and 75% of the youth diverted did not face a disciplinary transfer hearing. And so this was a significant reduction for us here in Philadelphia, and we were very pleased to see that. And then over 5 years, we've seen a 76% reduction in school arrests, and that is one of the things that we think is really important in a city like Philadelphia, where large numbers of students are entering the juvenile justice system directly from incidents that are beginning in schools, where many of those incidents are beginning as non-criminal acts. And so finally, as I wrap up here, I think one of the things that's really important is how do we think about this work moving forward? And this year we've made both some policy choices, and we have taken a significant approach to building on the efforts that we've started in the past. And one was something that we did very recently. We eliminated suspensions in kindergarten, and our plan is to gradually eliminate suspensions from kindergarten to second grade. But one of the things we noticed was that we had to first train individuals on other ways that they could approach behavior. We also eliminated out-of-school suspensions for dress code violations, and we continue to improve on school climate and culture through training and development of staff members, and we're focused on increasing attendance and keeping children in school. And a measure on that is the number of children who are attending school 95% of the time. And so one of the things that we believe is that the school diversion program has been very helpful as we begin to focus on changing environments and changing approaches for young people. And our whole goal here is to keep those young people in school. And so building on that, one significant approach in our effort has been the diversion program. And so at this time, I'm going to introduce Kevin Bethel, who led that work as Deputy Commissioner in the Philadelphia, with the Philadelphia Police, and he's now doing some work with Drexel University. So Kevin, I'm turning it over to you.
All right, Dr. Hyde, thank you. And just want to say to everyone on the call, Dr. Hyde has been a great champion for the work we're doing, and we have a phenomenal relation with both him and his team, Karen Lynch and Rachel Holtzman and Jody Greenblatt, who created his team to make this work. So I want to say that very up front. And so I'll move quickly because we want to get to questions. And so when we talk about those issues, it was also a policing issue. I come to this process as a guy who was a cop for 30 years, who saw that there was issues with policing, not just about the school, just about how police were taking young people out of the school for these minor offenses. And so in this graph, you'll see, zero tolerance led to an increase in school officers in our schools. 32,000 suspensions. That's a historical number. Dr. Hyde and his team have done a phenomenal job, and that's half of that number. But as he alluded earlier, over 1,600 kids were being arrested every year in the school district. A large percentage of those kids, over 65, 70% of those kids, were being arrested for minor offenses. And so we came to a place to say we have to change that. I'll say that, me taking officers taking a 10-year-old child out of school for a pair of scissors, taking him or her into the police headquarters, fingerprinting her or him, photographing them, holding them in a cell block, and then releasing them was unacceptable. I mean, we came to understand the trauma that would be exacted on a child. We were not asking questions about whether these children were physically abused, whether there was sexual abuse at home, whether they're eating at home. So it was very, very a strategic plan to not only deal with the school-to-prison pipeline, but to deal with the manner in which police would address young people coming into the system. As you see this slide here, the 134,000 schools, there's a larger percentage. There's another percentage in the charter schools. 51% of those kids were African American. 1,600 arrests, 80% are African American. So the issue of disparity is also prominent in this work. And so we set out a goal, as you saw on the early slide, keeping kids in school and out of court was a grant that and it would enable us to do, working with Drexel University and Dr. Goldstein, who's here with Drexel as the evaluator, reduce arrests by 50%, improve our retention rates, which Dr. Height talked about already, reduce the racial and ethnic disparities in the arrest. We created an unbiased system to ensure that every child was given the right opportunity, and finally provide service access. And this will be a change agent for policing, but we will now get into a process of providing services to these young people and help them in the issues they may be having. We have a strong partnership. As you heard Dr. Height, and you heard me name the people on his team, I can name them because they're true, hard-working folks who want to change behavior. DHS, Department of Human Services, provides all of the support services for the criminal justice system, the juvenile justice system. And Tameen Farlow and her team, David Bruce and Damon, have really come on board to support. This program would not run without DHS. And Drexel University, as anything else, as a police officer, I knew going through the process, folks weren't going to believe my numbers. So clearly bringing on an evaluator and bringing Drexel University on was key. And finally, I'll talk about behavioral health. They have recently, in the last 6 to 8 months, come on to do training with trauma-informed care to our officers, behavioral health 101. Those things are necessary for our officers to have a better opportunity to treat these kids in a positive way. And so as you heard me outline the process earlier, where we were taking young people as age 10 years old and bringing them the system, what this chart depicts, if you come across the top, the school officer would contact our Philadelphia police officers. We do not put sworn officers in the school. Dr. Height has 320 school officers, non-sworn, do not wear weapons. They call the Philadelphia police officer to come to make the arrest, and there are 84 of those officers who support that. In the past, they would be arrested for those offenses. Of those arrests, about 85% of those kids will be diverted through a district attorney's program. That program would then divert those young people back into the community, into our youth aid panel. And so what we decided was this was not going to work. What does it mean to take a 10-year-old child in cuffs out of the school? And we understood that. So we identified the specific crimes, low summary offenses and misdemeanors. And then what happens in the case now, that Philadelphia police officer who used to come to the school and would arrest that child now comes to the school. He gives that child, him or her, a letter and a guardian saying that within 72 hours, a social worker, and oftentimes accompanied by a police officer, goes to the home to do an assessment. And there they're going to do an environmental assessment. They're looking at psychological issues, any health issues in the home. And then that child is directed, as you see it come across the bottom, to refer to a community provider. There they will begin to work in the community, and they will get supports. These are the support services that they get. We have 6 programs across the city. DHS has a program called the Intensive Preventive Services Program. This is the outline of what that program is. Those kids will stay 30, 60, 90 days. Some kids will be sent even further into the process. They will be moved, stay longer in the process. If they identify other issues, that would work for them. And what those kids will get are the things that are outlined on here. Here's the catch. We do not have a stick. We do not go back and arrest a child if they do not want to take part in the services. It was our position early in the process that in many cases these kids should not even be sent to be arrested. A kid fighting in a hallway with no injuries should not be sent to policing for it to be moved into the juvenile justice system. We do have a collateral consequences conversation with them, and we make sure that they understand that they are not part of the program. But as Dr. Height indicated, almost 90% of those families participate. Most of them wanted services and could not get services and have been looking for it for a long time. As we quickly look at the statistics, we started, as Dr. Height indicated, close to 1,600 arrests in the year 2014, and we dropped to 724 arrests that following year. 486 kids were diverted. This past year, we dropped again to 569 arrests, total arrests, with 472 kids diverted, so we dropped 64%. One thing that is great about the program, we have a 13% recidivism. We've diverted over 1,080 students, and we've only had 13% of those kids recidivate over the last 2 years. In our control group, the group before ours, those kids who were not able to go through our program in the year 2013-14 school year are now about 35% recidivism. As you can see depicted on the screen, the majority of our offenses were weapon offenses, disorderly conduct, marijuana, and assault on teachers and assault on police. And one of the things we did with the assault on police, we stopped our officers from going to classrooms for code of conduct issues that we thought were contributing to some of those incidences. As you can see on this screen, the majority of our kids were African American and Latino. Again, that disparity continues to be reign true, but we're still working hard. But one thing we do know that every child who's eligible for the program gets the program. No biases, both explicit or implicit biases allowed. Once a kid is arrested for a particular offense, has never been arrested for, he or she is moved into the program. I think Dr. Height indicated in one of his slides, as you see in this slide here, the majority of the kids have never had a previous contact with a school officer. The majority of kids have never had a contact with any behavior in the school and never contacted the system. So these are kids who have never had a problem before, and in most cases it's the first time they were involved in something that resulted in them being called for the police to arrest. Most of the kids are passing their grades. Again, I talked to Dr. Height about that. We had a great morning breakfast conversation one day about these are the kids that you want to stay in school. These are the kids you want to continue to be in school. These are kids, the majority as indicated, were passing their grades. And so as we look at the program and trying to, again, make sure we have time for conversations, we are, because of the success of the program, the support we're receiving, we'll be expanding the program this year to do first-time retail theft summary offenders of juveniles, and that will be the entire city of Philadelphia. We have about 300 to 400 kids who will fall into that category. We're doing a lot of work around training for the school officers. It is important, vitally important, that officers who go into our school environment have an education about how to deal with young people. We find more and more that that's not the case. We're training our officers on mental health first aid, de-escalation techniques, and the like, and behavioral health coming in to give training on trauma-informed. It's important that you develop a tools and training to ensure that the officers going to school understand how to deal with young people. And the collateral consequences, similarly, we're now going a process of educating the young people on the collateral consequences of these arrests. So we're going to be doing assemblies. We're working with to do that now, and that should be underway in the next couple of months. And again, working to change as indicated earlier in the conversation, these legislations that forces oftentimes school districts to report incidences that should not be reported. And finally, we're looking at replication. And so I know I went through that pretty fast, and I apologize for that. I know we want to ensure at least 5 minutes for questions and answers, and my email is on the back slide if anyone needs to contact me for more updates. Teresa, I'll pass it back to the team.
Thank you so much, Kevin and Dr. Height. That was a fantastic presentation. We have a few moments for some Q&A here. I'll also point you to this last slide here where we have our website where we have a National Resource Center with a lot of articles, tools, etc. For some of the questions that you guys have all asked. We're going to get to a few questions, and any questions that we don't get to, we will do our very best to answer them when we send out the follow-up presentation that's recorded. Also, I'll let everybody know I added some files as we were discussing and looking through some of the questions. So I saw there was a lot of discussion about developing MOUs. I will point you to the School Justice TA Tools _ Clayton County. These were developed by Judge Stephen Teskey, and this is a great step-by-step of how to develop an MOU with your school district and either law enforcement or the courts. So I'm going to ask the first question to Kevin, and that is, what are other ways that SROs can be utilized in schools to thwart students from being arrested and placed in the court system?
I think the biggest part is communicating with the young people. There was some training that I saw which I thought was pretty good, in which one of the officers, and not here in Philadelphia, but in another jurisdiction, where they actually had the officers stand after school and had kids who would normally be either moved into the system or other types of behavior, and that child would go and meet with the officer after school and have it was a 1-hour dialogue where that young person would be able to sit in there and listen to the police officers, kind of talk to him about, his behavior and where it could have done. But I mean, I think the objective is, schools are like cities. You have to treat them that. You have to have a community partnership component to that. And there's really getting in there and having strong dialogue and mentoring, and that's why I think the SRO program and the NASRO, where they use a triad method, where really getting and engaging young people and mentoring, and that understanding that arrest is a last component that you want to do.
Thank you, Kevin. And I'll also point people to the recorded SRO webinar that's on our resource center. Dr. Height, this question is for you. How do you actually get school engagement? What are some of your suggestions on getting the schools on board with these sort of activities?
Well, some are making sure that schools are included when you're working through some of these policies, and then the others are just policy directives and decisions. And as bad as that sounds, I mean, so part of this is ensuring that there are expectations for children to remain in school and removing some of the gray areas, if you will, that allow individuals to have a catch-all approach to discipline. But a couple of things that we've done here in Philadelphia, I have a student advisory, and they advise the superintendent like once a month. As a matter of fact, when at the time Deputy Commissioner Bethel was thinking about the diversion program, he actually came to a student advisory meeting and spoke with the students who gave input on that policy. And in addition, we include teachers and administrators as we're talking about things like no kindergarten suspensions. And so I think that voice in the early development of these policies and these strategies, but I think also being very clear about the expectation about creating the types of climates that are conducive to keeping children in schools.
Thank you, Dr. Height. We have time for one more question, and this one's for Dina. Dina, A participant asked about due rights on school campus and making sure that you go to all lengths to make sure that those rights are upheld. Can you discuss what happened in Fulton County around due process and rights of students?
Yeah, so due process is definitely what we put in the forefront of all decisions, and so we build the capacity of administrators around understanding what due process is required for short-term suspension, which is the conversation with the student about the information you have and an opportunity for them to refute it, share their side before a suspension decision is made or before a discipline decision is made. And so we spend quite a bit of time talking with them and coaching them through that, as well as due process. There's more due process afforded if you want to suspend a student for more than 10 days. So that's when the disciplinary hearing process is required, and we have to hold that within 10 days. And so our office coordinates that hearing process to ensure that the hearing is held within the 10-day time period, but more importantly, that we also have that discipline team meeting prior to the hearing, like a mediation, to try to talk through what happened, make sure the parents and the students understand their rights, and that if they want to agree before the hearing and waive the hearing, that's fine, but they don't have to, that they have a right to have a hearing. And then we explain to them what their rights are at the hearing, that there'll be evidence presented, they'll have an opportunity to present evidence for themselves, that they can have an attorney if they want. So making sure that they're aware of those rights. All of those rights are included in our disciplinary hearing notice letter to the parent, giving them notice about the hearing. So again, it shares their rights there. And again, at the discipline team meeting, that mediation opportunity is wanting to make sure that they understand what those rights are. They don't feel pressure or forced into making a decision.
Thanks, Dina. I actually miscalculated a little bit, and we have a little bit more time for Q&A, which is a good thing. So anybody who needs to leave us, we completely understand, but we do have some more time, so if you have any last-minute questions, please let us know. I also want to direct everyone, we will have an evaluation that we'll bring up at the end of this presentation, so please take the time to fill out our evaluation. This question I might actually answer, and then I'll open it up to the group. But somebody asked, are there specific models that are evidence-based that have worked? This is kind of a tricky question. Being the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges, we are always interested in evidence-based programming. When it comes to school justice collaborative teams, partnerships, I can't say that there's actual evidence out there that would be up to the standard of saying it's evidence-based. There's certainly programs that schools can utilize that are evidence-based, and there's certainly a ton of information out there that this is promising practice, but we're just not quite there yet. But in terms of this partnership, we do feel that this is best practice to bring all your stakeholders together and work as a team to figure out what are the solutions to reducing those referrals from schools for minor offenses that end up in the juvenile justice system. I have a question, and I'm going to throw this out to possibly Kevin about maybe, and Dr. Haidt and Dina, if you think, how do you get families included in partnerships? Does anybody have any suggestion about bringing families on to these partnerships?
Doctor, you got that, Doctor? You want me to? I mean, for me, that's still a little bit of a challenge. I mean, our parents come in through our program. It is a family-based program, so when the kid is diverted into one of the IPS models, it is entire family engagement. There is going out to the homes and the residents, so they are on the back end, but there's still a process that I'm still working on to educate, and we'll be doing some community involvement very shortly, which I'll be going out in the community talking to parents about the program and how they can be better involved in doing a process on Saturday to be talking to parents. So I think it's about getting out in the community and making people aware of what's going on.
And I would just add to that, to Kevin's point, one of the things we have to do is also work on the trust issue between many of the families who have had bad experiences with organizations like DHS. And when we're saying DHS is going to be a part of the support structure, then many may take a very cautious approach to that. And so part of this is being very clear on exactly what we're attempting to do, the problem that we're trying to, being clear about what we're trying to avoid, that in this circumstances are student arrests, and exposing individuals to those services that could then be helpful, that really gets at the root cause of the problem that we're seeing that's manifesting itself through behaviors. And so part of it calls for a lot of engagement, a lot of information sharing, and a lot of living room talks or front porch talks with families about the types of resources that are available, and that those resources are there in support of what their children need versus a structure that's coming in to make a decision about whether or not a child stays or remains in the home.
And Teresa, that's why it's so important when the social worker goes to the home that we are very respectful, and because many of those families have been looking for services. If I lock them up, they can get wrap over, all kinds of services. And so going in there, many of them have looked for help and needed help. And so it's always going in there with respect and as Dr. Height, gaining their trust. I mean, oftentimes they've been tossed around so much or leery of anyone coming or a judge telling them they will. And so we try to give them the opportunity at their level to give them the respect and they deserve to be able to make some choices about their child. And when doing that, they are oftentimes being more engaged than they ever were.
Thank you, Kevin. Dr. Height. Tina, is there anything that you wanted to add to this one that wasn't discussed?
I just agree with what they said, and I believe the key is every person wants to feel valued, and so interacting with parents, that although there's a situation that has happened, to ensure that the way that we approach it is with one of dignity and respect, and highlighting how this can help, like how the resources and additional support that can be provided for it, and also making sure that you're connecting the dots and not having parents do double duty through the collaboration. That's why it's important that there's a lot of communication with the stakeholders and that understanding each role, so that we're not having parents go and get in two different orders or doing the same thing for two different reasons. So I think coordination and collaboration of the services, connecting the services, and making sure it's meeting the actual needs of the parent. This whole idea of being restorative applies to this too, doing things with the parents and not to them. So, you know, having them feel some sense of they're taking advantage or having input in what's happening, like asking them, what is it that you need? What is it that you think would be helpful? Are there some other supports that we might not be offering that you might need to kind of help them feel like this is very supportive and it's a way of doing things with them and not to them?
Thank you. One last question. Somebody said, who gets the ball rolling on this, us or them? I'm assuming what somebody was asking is does this start on the school end or does it start on the court end? I think the message from NCJFCJ would be that it really doesn't matter who starts it as long as people are meeting consistently and you can potentially have a judge as a convener. Part of Pathways was judicially led collaboratives, but that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be that model. If you look to Philadelphia, it was really police-driven, and that's fine. It can be school-driven. It really doesn't matter as long as you're bringing the stakeholders together in a room and meeting consistently and having respect for each stakeholder and what they provide. I think that's what really gets this work moving along. With that being said, I think it's time to adjourn, and I appreciate everybody, and a great big thank you to our faculty today. I think they did a fantastic job. There's been some really great chats going on, and we look forward to any follow-up, any questions that you have. You can direct to either Elo or myself, Teresa, and we'll be happy to answer those. Thank you very much, everyone. Take care.